All right. Welcome, Paul. I'm so glad to see you today. And everybody that's watching today, our live stream, as you tune in, I'm going to be really happy to answer your questions and see all your faces joining us. And so, Paul Loesel, and I hope I said your last name right, Paul.
Loesel is fine. Loesel. I grew up in the Midwest. Hi, everyone. I grew up in the Midwest, so my German name of Loesel became Loesel.
And Paul is going to be talking about his journey with Focal Hand Dystonia, which he has. And was it in both hands or one hand?
Well, interesting. Right hand initially. I felt over the years that I was like, wait a minute, is this kind of similar in my left hand? So I think possibly it's ended up in my hand too, but mostly right hand.
Well, we'll go ahead and discuss that here in a second. But if you want to go ahead and kind of introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about your upbringing. How did you get into music, especially piano, and like what that all entailed? I know that you sent me your bio and everything. So if there's anything you want to cover on that, you can as well too.
Okay, sure. I grew up in Michigan, like I said, and small town, farmer village, and I started playing the piano. Oh, this is Booger, by the way. You may see him popping in and out. I started playing piano when I was 5, and my parents put me into lessons soon after, because there was a little chord organ my father had because he was in the church choir, and he would plunk out his melodies to learn. And when I was 5, I would go up to it and just start plunking along. And then in kindergarten, I would come home and figure out the melodies of the songs we were singing in kindergarten. And my parents thought, okay, there's something musical going on here. Put me into lessons. I studied piano all my life. I then started studying the pipe organ in 5th grade because my piano teacher was also a church organist. And so she got me into that. And apparently I was pretty good at it, because by 7th grade, I was playing for services and weddings and funerals and making money as a 7th grader.
Oh my gosh.
And so then all through into high school, I got my own church job in a neighboring town and played the organ and continued studying piano. And then I went to college at Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, Michigan, where I initially started as an organ major.
Oh, wow.
Because I thought I was going to be a church organist.
Oh.
You know, because that's what I was making money at doing for so many years. And I thought, well, this is my thing. And at the kind of going backwards, I was also in my high school show choir, both singing and playing the piano for it. So I was learning a lot of musical theater repertoire. So when I got to college, I'm studying organ my first semester. I'm liking it. I wouldn't say I'm loving it. And I took a break one day, and I'm walking down the School of Music hallway, and I'm hearing this glorious music. And it happened to be the theater department rehearsing Sweeney Todd for the university production. And I'm looking and I'm seeing someone playing the piano like I did for my show choir in high school. And I thought, you know what? I really miss that. I miss this type of music. I love theater music. I want to work with a bunch of people and create art. I want to do that. And I immediately went to some of my actor friends who, you know, introduced me to their theater professors who I talked to, and they said, oh yeah, you can have a career in musical theater. This is what you do. There's orchestra pits, there's Broadway, you know. So I changed my major to piano performance, classical, in order to get as much technique as I could in 3.5 years before moving to New York City. Because I immediately was like, okay, I'm going to Broadway. This is what I want to do. My parents didn't love that so much.
Oh.
You know, small town boy.
Oh yeah, Midwest. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, they were scared for me in 2 ways. They've said over the years of, you know, A, you know, your safety, you know, scary big city, and B, just they didn't understand the world of musical theater and how are you going to make money? What are you going to do? They just didn't know how that was going to happen. And I didn't quite either, but there was something within me that knew, like, yes, this is what I'm meant to do, and I'm going to make this happen. So luckily, when I moved to New York right after graduation, I started working by playing classes, you know, for actors, for directors who would
Wow.
hold classes,
Wow.
on auditions, doing a lot of vocal coaching out of my apartment, you know, actor friends who would come over to prepare their audition material. And it just went from there, and you just started networking, and jobs grew from there to off-Broadway, and then subbing in orchestras on Broadway, to then getting my first, and hopefully only, knock on wood, full-time chair at Wicked on Broadway.
That's awesome. And what a tremendous career to have, and especially with that musical in particular, because I mean, that's probably like, I want to say that's like everyone's favorite. I'm not going to be biased, but I'm just going to say it's like everyone's favorite. So
Yeah, it
like,
seems to be over the years now, after almost going on 17 years, with the pandemic break in between, that it's one of people's favorites. Yeah.
wow, well, what an honor, and especially to be able to well, I just want to say, like, I don't know, because I've never done that type of thing, but there has to also be a certain amount of pressure involved too, to be able to play that professionally alongside with these type of people that are like super ambitious, super professional as well, just as much as you are.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was, I especially found when I started subbing on Broadway, I had no idea that some of the chair holders and a lot of the subs, they had all these other jobs. I mean, even now, our flutist, Helen, plays with the New York Philharmonic when
Wow.
she can. Or, you know, these other orchestras. I mean, these hardcore classical musicians that are around me playing, and I'm like, oh, I'm just a theater geek, you know, playing my theater music. You know, that being said, and this can go into our discussion of dystonia, but my piano training growing up, I loved my piano teacher. She was fantastic, but we did some scales and some arpeggios, but it wasn't actually a lot about technique. And I feel like when I got to college, that's where I was actually cramming in some technique from my teacher, and she knew full well that I wanted to go into musical theater, and she catered my, you know, what we studied to that, which was fantastic. But I feel what was missing from my life was more technique from the ground up, you know. And unfortunately, I don't want to blame my developing dystonia on you know, some bad technique over the years, but who knows? It could be.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because I always feel like it's either one or the other, because some people will be like it's too much technique involved, and others are like it wasn't enough technique involved. So it's really interesting to see how all the factors that play into onset sometimes, because sometimes it'll be like, well, it was, you know, like change something with my hand, or they did an embouchure change or something, and along with auditions and stuff and that type of thing.
Yeah.
Would you say that anything else was going on during the time well, I guess when you first started experiencing like onset, which I know it's hard to like look back and figure out the puzzle pieces, but was there anything in particular that kind of like stood out to you, or you kind of like were like, I didn't realize that then, but I do now?
Absolutely. I remember, this was before Wicked. I was subbing on a couple of other shows, one of them being Mamma Mia. So I subbed at Mamma Mia on Broadway for 2 years before getting Wicked. And there were 4 keyboards in the pit.
Wow.
And I was subbing on one where, especially at the top of Act 2, there was the entr'acte and the song, where on my keyboard part, it literally was 8th note triad chords. I mean, it's anyone who knows ABBA and is a fan of their music, you might know some of, you know, recognize some of that. But it was just this constant, this action. And I'm on a keyboard, which should make it easier sometimes than the heavier action of a piano. But what was happening to me is, I'm playing this music, I'm having a great time playing live music on Broadway, this is fun music, and I'm doing this, And I realized I started playing too hard for what was necessary, especially on a plastic keyboard.
Mm.
And that's when I started noticing the symptoms and the onset, not knowing what it was at the time. I had known of dystonia. I had read about it in our union paper years before, going, oh God, how terrible, how awful. I feel so sorry for these people who have this. I hope I never get this. Well, when I started feeling the symptoms, that I just didn't remember what that could have been. And I just started feeling in my fourth and fifth fingers a weakness, loss of dexterity. So when I was doing this, or if I had to do scales, they were much more difficult. Or I would, make a mistake. They just weren't clean. I just felt like, what is wrong? Okay, I'm tired. I've been playing a lot of shows, a lot of this. Sometimes I would not accept a show if they called me to ask if I could play it. I said, I'm going to just take a little break. Didn't work. And finally it's interesting that probably went on toward the end of Mamma Mia and then me getting Wicked. So I get into this new show. I'm playing different music. So I think I didn't notice it as much because I wasn't doing the same action that I noticed the problem in, I was not playing Mamma Mia, I was playing Wicked. So everything probably felt fine for a while. And it was about 2 to 3 years into Wicked that I started feeling and noticing the sensation of loss of dexterity again. And I thought, okay, what's this? And I finally went to a performing arts. I don't know if it's still around. It was a specialty in performing arts at, I believe it was Mount Sinai West, just on the side of Lincoln Center. I think I just looked up, where can I go for performing arts, disability problems? And they diagnosed me with dystonia. And I thought, oh, wow. And of course, the panic sets in, the fear. And they immediately hooked me up with this wonderful woman named Dr. Kathleen Riley, who I want to tell you all about. She helped save my career, saved my playing. She's who I studied with for biofeedback, which we can also get into. But from there, what was your initial question? Because I feel like now I'm just kind of the whole
mine was just like looking back and seeing onset.
Oh, yes.
This kind of symptoms that kind of sneak in. You're like, oh, something's a little off here.
Yeah.
But you did a really good job describing that. And like you said, you went and got help. When you went to get help, was it still just in that right hand, or did it kind of spread to both at that time?
No, I really felt it was just the fourth and fifth fingers of the right hand.
Okay. And then with your, like you were talking about Miss Riley, it's interesting that you're bringing this up because this is something that a lot of musicians with dystonia, we've heard about biofeedback, as an option, but nobody has ever really discussed their experiences with it. So it's very kind of like one of those things where it's like, like blurry area in the brain is like, I have no idea what that even looks like or what it entails. So we would definitely love to hear all about it.
Sure, yeah. Let's jump into that because, as I said, it really did change my life, both mentally and physically. And as we know, with dystonia, the two are intrinsically connected. So Dr. Riley at the time was a professor at NYU in piano. And so I started studying with her. And at the time, it was all about biofeedback. And she used this program called Performavision. And I would go to her studio, and there would be a camera on the right side of the keyboard, a camera on the left, one from above, just different angles. And in front of me were a couple of video screens where I could see the camera pictures of my hands from the side.
Oh, wow.
Or from above. And I could also see various graphs. And so she would also hook up, what do you call them? Little sticky pads.
Oh, like the electrodes. Electrodes?
Yeah. So the sensor pads she would put on my various muscles from my neck down to my shoulders, some on, you know, the flexors in the arms, various sides. And so as I was playing, and we would literally start out by playing, and I'm going to do this from the side, you know, with the tricky fingers, hitting a note just with one, just over and over, hitting it and maybe holding it. And a lot of times with the key, it would, you know, just shake like crazy because it was just so weak. But I would watch on the screen not only the shape of my finger, because, you know, if I was flat like this, she didn't want me to do that. That's not proper technique. You know, she really wanted the curved hand. And to see where the muscle, let's say you would see the sensor line, continuing graph of this muscle here in my arm. And if it would go up, meaning, oh, your muscle right here is working so hard to make this happen. Relax, relax. And just by thinking, relax that muscle, use just the finger, use just the hand, this would relax.
Oh, wow.
So what she would show me was that other parts of my body trying to compensate. And sometimes, you know, I'd be playing and all of a sudden the graph would go crazy because I'm going like this and I'm lifting my right shoulder to make something happen. And combined with seeing that with exercises she gave me to do at home, literally I would spend hours doing these single note depressions. And with time, I could make these depressions without them shaking so much. And it was all for me just thinking to relax everything. And, you know, I mean, not everything. Obviously, you have to use your muscles to play, but it would be a motion of playing with the whole arm and not just the finger. It was, it's hard to describe, but it was it's a mental game. And maybe some people who are watching know what I'm talking about. If you can trick your mind into playing a certain passage, you know, you're getting to a passage that's coming up and it's, you know, this has been hard for you. And you're like, okay, this time I'm going to do it. And sometimes with positive, you know, mental feedback, you can do it. And there's one phrase in Wicked that as I was dealing with this whole, with studying with her and dealing with dystonia, it would come up. And sometimes if I already saw my fingers move that pattern before I did it, I could play it better. And even in the moment, I would imagine each finger doing the right thing and I would do it better. So I think biofeedback was, oh, I have to say one more thing about that. We would play certain passages, even like the one from Wicked that I had trouble with, over and over, and I would watch what my hand looked like. And sometimes, especially the pianists out there will know that you're playing something, and if this is hard, all of a sudden you see your thumb rising up with tension. Because you think like, oh, if I do that, it's going to put more weight in this part, which I need it. And that's bad because you're just causing so much more tension in the hand. And I would see that with biofeedback, we'd be playing it, or I'm doing this and all of a sudden this finger is way high in the air. Like, oh, nope, try it again. Relax, da-da-da. Oh, that worked. So, and we would record these sessions so I could watch back, because sometimes if you're looking at the music, you obviously can't see the hand.
Yeah.
But I studied with her for a good 5 years at least.
Wow.
And really progressed in that time. And it wasn't weekly. It started out weekly, and then, you know, as I improved, we could space out the sessions. But I can we can continue and you can ask if there's any questions, but I want to, you know, say to everyone, her name is Dr. Kathleen with a K, Riley, R-I-L-E-Y. She has now moved on from NYU in New York City. She lives on the West Coast, but she still teaches, and she teaches people with dystonia, not only pianists, she works with other instrumentalists, singers, and she does it remotely now, like almost all of us do with things during this time. And I have a friend who came to me last year and, you know, asked about my dystonia because he feared he had it. I hooked him up with Dr. Kathleen Riley. He also at the time went to doctors in the performing arts. He actually was not diagnosed with dystonia. So what I want to say is, you may think you have dystonia, and maybe you do, or maybe you don't. His ended up being a musculoskeletal issue, but he continues to study with Dr. Riley with biofeedback, and they're able to work together. Obviously now it's more about, she can't hook him up with electrodes and all, but she can watch him and work with him that way. And he has felt that even in a year, he has had some success with her. So everybody look up, she's got a website, Dr. Kathleen Riley.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and afterwards I'll link her information in the comment section as well, in the description too.
Great.
So that people can access her. Because yeah, if she's on the West Coast, that's great.
Yeah. Take a trip down.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really fantastic that you spoke about this, because it's interesting that you're talking about how the biofeedback, it kind of helps you pinpoint like where the tension is kind of arising, because we're not always aware of where it's coming from, or that we're doing certain things until we start observing our body, which is like such a hard thing, because I feel like with recovery, it's like so multi-layered in the sense that it's like you have to kind of figure out where the tension's coming from, but also, address the mentality of it as well, of letting go and being very kind of this mindful awareness involved in recovery too.
Yes, and I want to make sure people know that what biofeedback is doing, I believe, and I think Dr. Riley would agree, that it's not a cure for dystonia. It is assisting in helping us all live and perform with dystonia. I may never be 100% sure, cured, and we're all going to live with dystonia, but how can we go on with our lives, and especially our performance lives, our livelihood with this? And biofeedback has increased my confidence in playing and increased my ability again to a point, but to the highest level that I feel I could get to. In the first year, I was terrified that this is it. My career is over. I'm going to lose my job at Wicked, and I don't know what I'm going to do. But thankfully, my journey was beyond that, and I kept my job, and I still would struggle with little kind of what we call flare-ups in the dystonia. I would be fine for a while, because I think just whatever's going on in my life, I think a lot of us know, or maybe don't know, that stress in your normal life will have all to do with how your dystonia reacts, I feel. If I'm, again, if I'm nervous performing, my dystonia will act up. I won't be as free with the things I've learned. So stress is a big thing to, obviously we all live with stress. It's hard to say, I'm going to get rid of stress easily and perform, at my best, but it's always a challenge. But those moments when I'll play that one passage in Wicked and be like, oh, yep, not sounding so great anymore. I'm going to go back and study on my own for a few days with my single finger exercises. Or I'm going to really think now and not zone out after my 5,000th performance of Wicked. I'm not going to just do the muscle memory. I need to actually think right here in this moment about how to play this passage better.
I do the same thing too when I'm playing as well, because for me, I have to be really aware of where the tension is coming from. And I know I'm to the point now where I can just immediately, I'm like, okay, it's in this muscle, the zygomatic muscle right here. I'm like, I have to quit tensing that up as much, so I might loosen it a little or massage it or something. But it's interesting that you talked about how it also, what biofeedback showed you was that how the tension sometimes can go to completely kind of like this macro view of where the tension comes from. It can sometimes go all the way up into the shoulders or into the arm up here, and that's kind of like how David I can't never say his name, David Leicester. He's a classical guitarist in New York that I interviewed from, I think he's actually at NYU. No, he's at Manhattan School of Music, sorry. But he wrote a book on on guitar playing, but he recovered from dystonia with this kind of approach where he realized it came from farther back in his arm in order to recover. But would you say there's a point that you reached, like what was the point where you reached where you're like, because I know for me it's been like, you know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and then 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Was there a point, like a kind of bridge point where you're like, wow, I'm not relapsing as much anymore. This is significant. Was there like a certain thing you were doing, or like I guess a certain year that started happening?
Yeah, and it might be misleading asking me that question. Excuse me. Only because I might be in a different position where I'm playing the same thing every day, every night, the exact same notes, the exact same phrases. I ended up not playing any new material. Excuse me.
It's okay.
Ooh.
Sorry.
No. So playing the same music for 16 years, I would play the rehearsal score and I would play my part at night. And I also, part of my job is teaching the show to new cast members. So they come in and I can plug out their part, but that doesn't take a lot of technique. And I love that part. But I found with working with Dr. Riley, I would bring in my score to the show and we'd go over the parts that I had trouble with. And I just refingered them. As a pianist, it was easier to be like, oh, I'm going to either refinger something in the right hand, or why don't I play with my left hand for a while? Because a lot of theater music, especially for keyboards, is you're only playing with one hand sometimes. And a lot of it is written for the right hand. I'm like, well, why? I'm just going to play it with my left. Or sometimes I did combo platters, but we refingered the whole show. So that it was not a false sense of security or a false sense of, oh, I'm better. I knew I was, shaking it up, but at least I wasn't using those 2 fingers as much. But then I also felt, I guess what I'm saying is it's hard to know because I stopped playing other music. When I was playing auditions and was sight reading with dystonia, I had a harder time because that's the thing with Wicked and playing the same thing over and over. I knew how to trick it out. I knew, yeah, like you were saying, like, oh yeah, this is that passage coming up and this is how I'm going to play this. I knew how to trick it out, where sight reading and playing auditions, I couldn't trick it out. I was literally in the moment, and something that I used to play before dystonia brilliantly, I was like, oh yeah, that was messy and terrible, but it was auditions. I was supporting the singer in a different way. But so I think it was easy for me, and thank God I have my Wicked job, to not, with having dystonia, maybe it's easier that I have one job because I don't have the challenge of learning new material and auditioning with new material and trying to get another job. I'm very lucky. I'm still going to knock on some wood here for Wicked and having that job. But you know what I'm saying?
Oh my gosh.
It's harder to tell how much I improved because I can trick out the show.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because that's how I feel in brass quintet right now, because it's like we play music and we'll sight read music, the first time through or whatever, the first week or 2, it's really rough because I'm just kind of getting used to, like, do I need to alternate, like I do like you, I alternate techniques, but with me it's between tonguing and air attacks, because air attacks we don't use our tongue, but we mimic it to sound like the tongue. So it's like I'll alternate between like tongue and air.
Oh yeah.
Or like sometimes I'll slur a passage instead of like articulate it to make it easier, or just little tricks here and there. So it's like I kind of have to adjust to the music and then, add in these kind of like modifications here and there on top of, like, because I know what will trigger it sometimes. They'll be like, oh, going upwards in this register is just too difficult. Like I gotta do something else here or something, like, put it more on my lower mouth or lower lip rather than upper lip or something like that. But it's like you said, it's a little bit easier once you get to know the music rather than sight reading, because like in orchestra it's a little terrifying for me sometimes because it's so exposed, even though brass quintet is exposed because it's like a chamber group, it's only like 5 people, but for some reason in orchestra, it's so much scarier because it's like when you play alone, you're like alone.
Yeah.
You're like completely out there, vulnerable.
Yeah, and
And
honestly, that can lead into the discussion of living with dystonia and your colleagues around you. You know, how do you feel about, well, staying in the closet with dystonia and then coming out of the closet with dystonia? You know, the fears of always, what do they think of me? Oh, do they know? Or yeah, just what do they think of me when they do know? And so I feel that it's important, you know, and everybody is going to have their own story and way to get through this and come out. But I felt more relieved about going to, you know, my conductor, my boss at the show. And then, you know, I told my colleagues that I had this to let them know that this is what I'm struggling with. So they were on my side. And that's the thing, is they were so supportive, saying, you know, I'm so sorry, but I'm here for you. Let me know if there's anything I can do. And over the years, it's just been so amazing. And people will still, you know, my coworkers, every once in a while, like, hey, how you doing? You sound great. How, you know, are you still struggling with it? You sound great. Or, you know, sometimes I will make a mistake, and, you know, at intermission, I'll be like, yeah, you heard that one, right? Dystonia's acting up, you know, and it's just, so I think it's important to, I found it relieving to come out and have a discussion with it. There, I'm sure in some circles there will be a stigma against people with dystonia. And so, yeah, it's a very scary thing to come out with it or not.
It's really great that they were so supportive of you, because yeah, it is kind of like hit or miss, you know, for some people, or they'll be in one environment where it's really toxic and another where it's really supportive. And I think that's really great that you talk to them about it too, so that it's like some of them don't know about it. They're like, what is that?
Yeah, exactly.
And some of them are like super curious, you know, like, oh yeah, I'm so glad to tell you about this and everything. And the other thing I noticed, which you probably noticed too, is like, I realized that, you know, with dystonia, we tend to, because we already are hypersensitive and criticizing our playing, you know, just by the way we sound and then based off our disorder. But then other people, they'll hear us and they'll be like, I feel like you're like super over judging yourself, you know, when you're playing, because I don't hear what you're hearing. It sounds so much better than what I think you perceive it, because you're feeling the intensity of it, but you're not really hearing how it's not as affected by whatever's going on as much as you think it is, because it sounds really good. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, listen, we're all going to beat ourselves up no matter what, whether it's music or dystonia or anything in our lives, because we're living inside our bodies, right? And then as musicians, let's call it, you know, pre-diagnosis, pre-dystonia, you knew how well you could play. So now you have something to compare with. Oh yeah, I can't play that scale like I used to, but that's only because you know, you're inside your own body. But yeah, like you said, people on the outside cannot always hear it.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess that's kind of a good side of it.
Yeah.
Before we move on, I just want to go ahead and do some shout outs to the people in the comment section here. I don't know if you can see them, but Richard Ware joined us, and he was so excited to join today. He messaged me. He's like, I can't wait for tomorrow's live stream. And so he's saying, yes, I totally understand what mental game you were dealing with. I'm engrossed in your story. And then we have Roger J. Levine. He says, thank you for sharing your journey. This is very helpful. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person someday when Broadway opens back up. And so then they're kind of talking to each other over here. And then Mark Dubose, he says, thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for doing the interviews. So we'll get some questions probably here as we go further on. But so far, we have a lot of people that are saying thank you.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm glad to share my story. You know, it's been, what now, going on 16 years of having dystonia. So I feel like it's so a part of me, but yet such an accepted part of me that I don't know what I can say to help people. But I guess, well, exactly what you're doing, just by interviewing people with dystonia. There has to be little bits and pieces that people can pick up on. So I'm glad to do this, and hopefully something helps. Even if one person reaches out to Dr. Riley, or I think that's great.
When you did go into biofeedback, was there any fears involved with that? Because I know sometimes people are like, scared of like the electrodes and that kind of thing.
Oh, not
or were you kind of like?
I mean, I've never been scared of medical things at all. I was in the hospital a lot as a kid with various other issues, and needles poked in me, and I've been in an MRI machine a number of times, so that was nothing for me.
Oh, I know, that small confined space. Yeah.
Yeah. That was, yeah. Oh. MRIs are mildly terrifying, but.
Oh, Mark asked a question. He says, "Can you describe how Dr. Riley does her work without hooking the body up to the machine?"
Partially. I would say that only because obviously I was lucky to study with her when we were in the same city, and I could have the electrodes hooked up to me. Since she is now on the West Coast, and they're doing it through Zoom or whatever, I believe right now it is only a visual study where she can ask her student to position the camera a certain way, whether it's on the side of the keyboard or, if you're an instrumentalist in any way, and she can at least look at posture. And I say partially because I actually don't know. I haven't been in one of her classes or one-on-ones that she does now. I would have to reach out to my friend who now studies with her that way. Sorry, I don't have any more information about that, but I can tell you, if you are interested to find out more, I know Dr. Riley offers free, like an initial introduction session where she can speak with you about what's going on, and maybe even do a little bit on camera as an introductory, like, is this for me or not? So you could get a taste of it by reaching out to her.
That's really great. And you guys, I'll put it in the comment section again if you want to check back later, and also in the description when I load this onto YouTube channel as well. So I didn't tell you, Paul, but I also load this onto YouTube after I'm done, but I edit it so it's all nice and everything. It has an intro and thank yous and stuff.
Oh, great.
Well, with the biofeedback, I really love that you told us about that. And Mark says, thank you so much for saying that. What was I going to ask? Oh, yeah. I was going to say, when you started to feel the dystonia in your left hand, was that while you were going through the biofeedback retraining, or was that like prior to that?
Actually, it was post. I had studied with her and, figured out what was going on, and tricked out my book and everything. And it was then I stopped studying with her because I felt I had the information that I needed on my own to correct things. And so it was after the fact that I was feeling some things in my left hand. But then again, because I'm playing the same show every night, the work my left hand had to do was not as technical as the right hand. And so even though I felt, actually right now it's funny that I'm holding my hand like this and I'm seeing my pinky shake. I felt that there was a change, a possible dystonia in my pinky of my left hand. I'm normally just playing octaves or just playing like a bass line, a single line. So, and no scales or anything. So this hand didn't worry me at all. And even though I can notice it sometimes, it feels a little bit, weaker, it doesn't worry me with what I personally have to do in the show.
Okay, that's good. Well, I mean, that's so difficult because, when it spreads to another limb, it can kind of be scary sometimes when that happens. And it's like, what do I do? But it's good that you already had that base of knowledge to kind of approach it in the same way, which is helpful too. Did you feel like it spread to any other tasks outside of your music playing at all?
Ooh, yeah, actually. Oh, definitely. Typing on a keyboard at the computer. I used to be, I studied typing in high school because I'm that old, where we had a typing class. And so I learned all the proper, which fingers go to what keys, and I was really good at that for many years. But now, because these two fingers are kind of weak, I find myself doing the the hunting and pecking version. So yeah, it did spread to that.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's crazy when that happens. But when you were training, would you say that how do I say this? How do I say this? Oh, my brain is like going to a million different questions. But would you say with retraining, is there any advice you have as far as like, things that you kind of avoided, you would say you would avoid doing that may have made things worse, or are there certain things that you felt like were very beneficial to help your improvement at all?
Actually, yes, I did avoid typing on the keyboard so much. Instead of writing emails back and forth to people, and oh, thank God for when we got to voice to text ways of doing things. So now, instead of typing so much, you can just speak it in and create it. But there was a time before that I would tell people, like, this is going to be a short email because my hand is getting tired, and I need to watch how my hand feels because I'm playing the show tonight or something. Also, I found writing, maybe it was just the way that I held a pen or pencil, that the tension in holding that in writing would tire out that hand and tire out those fingers.
Oh
so
my gosh.
I stopped. My handwriting got a lot worse because I was always trying to just not have so much tension, and it would be completely sloppy. But if I was the only one reading it, if I was writing myself a note or something. But, yeah, those I would avoid. I still do to this day. I still avoid writing a lot and typing a lot.
I hear you there, because I'm pretty sure that I have writer's cramp, because and it's weird because they say that there's a like percentage of musicians that usually have like writer's cramp that comes with dystonia, even if you have like embouchure dystonia. So it's so strange, because I kept thinking for a long time, a couple years, into having dystonia, I was like, that's weird, I don't have writer's cramp. But as the years went on, I noticed I do, because it's like as I get older, it just gets worse and worse and worse, and I get this such bad like soreness in my thumb area here, and I start to notice the curling and everything. I'm like, oh gosh, like this is horrible. I don't know how people with hand dystonia deal with it. But not that embouchure dystonia isn't bad, but
Right.
And I'm just really glad that you've recovered so far. Would you say there's a percentage that you would put on it? Like, as far as like sometimes I tell people, like, I'm around 80-85%. I feel like my abilities, kind of sways back and forth between that range a little bit.
Yeah, I would, I might have to agree with you as far as me. I would say 80, 85, 90%. Again, I would say that's as much as I've, at the level I've gotten to in improvement. It's hard to tell depending on what I'm doing. When I'm playing the show again, and it's funny, like, it's been months since I've played what I've played every night for 16 years. I'm going to get back to studying my own book again to, hopefully when we get back to work, which could be sometime later this year. But yeah, I'm going to have to work back up to that. And I was going to say, I feel like my percentage would be higher playing Wicked, because again, I can play the same thing. Where I sit down now and play music just for the fun of it. I think I have some Brahms out behind me. My percentage would be lower, because it's more like I'll try something that I haven't played in years, or just sight read some new things just for the fun of it. But I'm like, oh yeah, that's really hard right there. So it just depends on what I'm playing.
Yeah,
I will always, I'll go back to just Wicked because that's my higher percentage. So I'm happier about that.
I know, it's really great when it's like you feel like with your dystonia, like there's certain pieces that you're just like, hey, it's like stuck. Like my dystonia gets it. Like it's not going to fight me as much anymore. It's like such a wonderful feeling. But that's awesome that you're working on Brahms. or playing through
Yeah.
it. I also want to ask too, because you seem like you have a lot of good mentality going into this as well, because I know a lot of musicians, the way they are able to cope with this mentally kind of varies. Some are very like, it takes them, years to get through the grieving process, and because it comes with so many layers, like reputation, the whole being involved in the music community and that type of thing. Would you say that after being diagnosed, how did you deal with it in a positive way, or was there certain, or were you just kind of like, no, I was depressed for like 5 years, and then I finally got out of that hunch?
Yeah, I was definitely depressed at first, and honestly, I had never been in, wait, by that point, no, I had never been in therapy before, and uh, Dr. Riley was a great therapist. So she was really good for me, and not only working physically with me, but there were times I would go to her for a lesson and things weren't going well, and I would cry. I was scared. I would break down, and we would talk through it. So she was a great therapist too. But then I did end up in therapy, not because of dystonia. Um, I also deal with depression and anxiety issues. And so I actually ended up in therapy a number of times. I would do therapy for a year or two and then take a break and then back again. So I found that dealing with my own personal depression and anxiety outside of dystonia and music helped me in what you were saying, or what you're perceiving as me having a positive attitude about it, because I had to find a positive attitude about life in general. Like I had to deal with some other demons in life, with depression and anxiety, which then I think just fed into my music and then my dealing with dystonia. Because for me, one of the big things was getting to the acceptance level of having dystonia. So any trauma you're going through, any problem in life, you have to get all those stages of grief, the denial and the whatever. And it was the acceptance of things. So instead of the depression I had for a while of having dystonia, of like, my life is over, this sucks, I'm never going to be the highest level that I thought I ever was going to be doing this. It was, well, this is what I have, this is my life. How am I going to continue my life and be happy? Because I have no other choice. I can't control this dystonia other than going through some physical therapies and biofeedback and whatever, but I can't get rid of it. So I had to make a conscious decision to accept it, like anything else in life that we don't like. So I don't know, I guess the best I can say is I had some help just with getting some therapy.
Well, very well said there too, with the whole like having to accept it, because it's just what it is, and that's part of the process, and that's very hard for some people, because it's like they feel like if they accept, that means giving up, giving up all hope in general. But that's not always true. You can accept it, you can embrace it, in a way where it's like you're not just being like, well, I'm doomed for life.
And and it gave me also the opportunity to look for other things to do in life, rather than I am only a performer. And you know what? Maybe I'm just speaking because I'm a pianist, and in musical theater, I already was writing music before I had dystonia. So I actually dove more into writing music and wrote a couple of shows. And so my career changed. I was still in music, but it changed. And I also, I coached more people came to my house for auditions and stuff. So things that were less pressure, instead of like a performance level dealing with dystonia, I was able to still play and enjoy music, but doing it on a much lower level of pressure, where I'm playing for people in my home and still getting paid. But obviously that's different for people who are not pianists, if a French horn player or whatever you may be doing. But maybe there's something else within the music world you can find to expand and to do and to still enjoy music, but maybe has a lower pressure of that performance level, whether it's teaching, writing, I don't know. There has to be other things. But
Well,
I found myself kind of branching out in those ways
well,
too.
that's really great that you said that too, because yeah, I think that's such an important thing too, is realizing there's so much more aspects to you as a musician. Like you're inherently a musician, you know, no matter what instrument you play, there's always some type of creativity involved that you can do or get involved in. And I love that you also compose, and like you were saying before we started the live stream, you said that you had a really great what do you have, like a co-writer that you worked with also with composing, and that you had a lot of great experiences with it and everything.
Yeah, that was something that I had played around with. Actually, we got to some amount of success before I had dystonia, but like I said, I really jumped into writing after dystonia, where I wrote a much larger show, a more operatic show, and spent 10 years developing that. And we got to some regional productions, and now it's being licensed by Samuel French. So at least it can be out there in the world. If someday we get back to live performances, somebody can do my musical. But we had a few productions. But yeah, it really, I was thankful for that part of my music life, where it wasn't just performing. And also, you know, I needed something fresh to do outside of Wicked.
Yeah.
Wicked is great, but you know, it is the same thing over and over and over and over. So I needed it helped me mentally to do something new and fresh by being a writer too.
Yeah, I completely understand. Well, I mean, it's really wonderful. I mean, it's such an honor talking to you as well, because I mean, it's not, I have to say you're the first person I met that's worked in theater, because even though I love theater, you know, I've never been like a theater major. I mean, sometimes I'd hang out with the theater kids in college, and they're their own complete, you know, they're like musicians, but way more extreme.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, they're just that much more eccentric than us. But I love it, and so I think it's such a great thing to talk about as well, because this bridges also into another genre in which musicians work with as well. And then also on top of it with the dystonia too. Would you say that there are any daily routine care you kind of have to do with your hands at all? Because I know for like me, I do like, you know, upper body stretches or like neck stretches and that kind of thing every day.
Absolutely. For me, and again, this came pre-dystonia, but I love yoga. I found for me personally, what it does for my body and my mind is perfect for dealing with dystonia, because it gives you, anybody who already does it or can read about it, it gives you a better sense of being in the moment and peace and calm, which is only the best things you can do for, you know, performing with dystonia. And then, like you said, physically, anytime we can continue to keep the strength in our bodies, and as we get older, and as I'm really feeling in my 50s, just the aches and the pains and
You don't look 50.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Of getting older, you know, that it's a very true thing. And so I just find yoga will help, especially, you know, downward dog and all those good things, keeping the upper body strength as a pianist, the shoulders, the back, keeping them active. So I am not just playing with my fingers, you know, I'm using my whole upper body. So I would highly suggest anybody dealing with dystonia, because I could feel any dystonia you have, yoga is wonderful for that. So I don't study it, I don't do it every day, but I take class twice a week, and then sometimes at night when I'm, you know, right before bed, I'll do just a couple of my own short yoga stretches and things.
Well, thank you for saying that. That's awesome. That's great advice. And I love that you said that the importance of like moving the upper body more than just in this one position. Because I learned that with my face, actually, because with the embouchure dystonia, you know, it's funny because when I played the French horn for so many years, I never realized, you know how you see some musicians when they play, their eyebrows move? And I never had eyebrow movement. My face was just like stone cold, like when I played in the past. And then I realized when I got dystonia, I was like, I had to practice moving my muscles in my face in different directions and different facial expressions that I'm used to, because I'm not usually someone that uses a lot of muscle movements in my face. And so that's helped me a lot too, you know, just going to these other ways of muscle usage that help me out. So that's really great that you said that.
Yeah, and that's funny. That reminds me of, ever since I studied as a kid, there was something in me that whenever I saw pianists play and, you know, all of the, like the classical this and that, I always thought it looked so funny. And for some reason, I got it in my head that I had to play properly and stay still. And like, this is the way you actually play. And I remember my teacher then, and then Dr. Riley also, I'd be playing. And if I got like just too, you know, straight and narrow and just this, they, you know, push me a little bit. I was like, loosen up. I was trying to be like, oh, you know, well, yeah. You know, because I was a very shy kid and I wanted to play in a group. That's why I ended up in an orchestra, I think. But, you know, I didn't want to be the star. So I just wanted to do my thing. And I didn't need to like do all the flashy this and that. In my mind, that was flash, but not necessarily. That's freedom of movement. And I find myself now just reminding myself too, it's like, yeah, loosen up. Let the music come through my whole body instead of just my fingers.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I totally agree 100%. Exact same way. Well, it's been so great talking to you, Paul, and we're getting close to the end here. So before we go, I just want to ask you one last question. And the last question I usually ask everyone is, if you had any advice for somebody who has recently been diagnosed with dystonia, maybe just some positive advice or just advice in general. I know that's kind of like a broad spectrum to ask of you, but if there's anything you'd like to say at the last minute.
Yeah, and I think it just comes down to, you are not alone. When I first was diagnosed, I literally didn't know any of my colleagues, and I'm not just saying at Wicked, any of my Broadway friends, my Broadway colleagues, my musician friends who had dystonia. That did not mean they didn't exist. But I felt so alone because here I was and I was scared to talk about it. But then the more I did talk about it, and then I finally did an interview in the local 802 American Federation of Musicians magazine, where all of a sudden I would get a phone call or an email from someone within the business saying, hey, I read your article, can we chat, you know, quietly. You know, they were scared to come out because either they thought they had dystonia or they were diagnosed with it, but they needed to talk. And I started realizing, oh yeah, we're out there, you're not alone, there are other people who have to struggle with this. And it always helps to know that there are other people and people who are getting through it. So with that being said, just the first mindset of you're not alone, there's other people, and use that to give yourself the freedom, give yourself the permission to reach out and get help, whether it's physical therapy, biofeedback, or even therapy, talking therapy, you know, to really help yourself through the struggle, because it's hard, you know. So that's the advice I could give.
That's really great. Thank you for saying that so much. And you've been such an inspiration. We have one person that chimed in here with a question. They said, are you aware of anyone on the East Coast that offers the biofeedback technique, since Miss Riley is over here on the West Coast?
I wish I could say yes, but honestly, right before I got on this call with you, I reached out to Dr. Riley saying the exact same thing, saying, hey, do you have any of your colleagues, any friends, do you know anybody in the New York City area? And she said, unfortunately, no. So she would love people to reach out to her that way, but I'm wondering, and I'm going to do some research on my own too, just starting to Google and see if we can find somebody for all of us here on the East Side, on the East Coast.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be great. And I mean, it helps when it's like a musician like Miss
Yeah,
Riley. I mean, how lucky were you to come across her, to
yeah,
not only have somebody that plays piano and also does biofeedback.
yeah,
That's so rare.
yeah. So yeah, let's work on that. I'm gonna do some research, and if I find anyone, I can send it to you, and then people can maybe check in with your page.
All right, yeah. They're saying that would be great. And they're saying thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. All right. Thank you, Richard and Mark, for chiming in there at the last moment, too. And Roger, too. Thank you for writing for those questions here for us. Yeah. All right, Paul. Well, I think we're going to end the session here. But what's going to happen after this is I'm going to go ahead and then take some time to edit this, and I'll upload it on YouTube. I'll send you a link. It may take some time because I have some more interviews coming up soon, but I also started a new job, so I'm kind of like,
Oh,
you know,
wow.
yeah, like
Yeah,
it's like, why does it always happen to me?
you have a lot going on, yeah.
But that's what will happen. Otherwise, this one will post to my Musicians Dystonia Live Talk Facebook page if you want to share it with anyone. And then if I have any questions in my inbox, I'll send them to you via email so you can answer those as well.
Fantastic. I'd be happy.
All right, Paul. Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad to have you, and I hope to have you again at some point too as well.
Sure. Thank you for having me, and best of luck to everybody out there.
All right, bye, Paul.